It's 70.
We are live now.
Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Esteemed curator of the Literary Club and the chairperson of today's session.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Madge, sir, are you ready? Shall I begin?
काय त्याला काहीच कोण काय बोलत
आपल्याकडून काही ऐकू येत नाही सर.
मी तर बघतो ना
न्यूज त्यांच्याकडून
बाहेर झाला 100 प्रश्न विचारते. काय चाललंय ते?
Sir, can we begin?
मी बोललो.
I think we need to wait for a few minutes because Sirs has left the meeting.
I see.
A few technological. Yes, I think he.
Very much so.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Esteemed curator of the Literary Club and the chairperson of today's session, Professor Prashant Sinha, respected speaker, Dr. Vijay Madge, members of the Literary Club, and dear attendees. I welcome you all to the 53rd session of the Literary Club in association with the ELTAI Pune chapter, the Alumni Association of Department of English and CLS, Saurashtra University, Rajkot, and the School of Humanities, MIT ADT University, Pune. Let me quickly take you through the structure of the session. We'll begin with the talk by our distinguished speaker who will speak on the topic Mrs. Dalloway 100, What After? We will have a short Q&A interaction following that. Later, the closing thoughts will be given by our chairperson, followed by a quick update about the next session. Let me take a quick minute to introduce our speaker now. I now invite Professor Vijay Madge, a former professor of English literature from AM College, University of Pune, whose doctoral work is on T.S. Eliot, The Knight and the Saint. We have also had the privilege of attending a 5-day workshop on the wasteland by Professor Madge at the Literary Club in the previous time. During our national webinar that took place earlier this year, he chaired the Literary Theory and Criticism panel and was the speaker for the poetry panel where he elaborated on the language in poetry. He has to his credit multiple eclectic publications in both creative writing and critical writing. To mention a few, Academiad, a satirical poem on Indian academics, a new edition taken out recently with the addition of a few more poems. Once Upon a Time, a novel, Dreams and Desires, second volume of verse. Further, along with the research papers in various journals, Sir edited a couple of books on literary criticism and theory and one on Vijay Tendulkar's plays. In fact, Sir has received a special honor of being invited by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II to participate in the bicentenary celebration of Dickens' birth at Buckingham Palace. We are also privileged to have Professor Prashant Sinha, who will be chairing today's session. Professor Sinha was the former head, Department of English, Pune University, and has a teaching experience of over 50 years. He is also the curator of the Literary Club and a mentor to us all. I warmly welcome you too, sir. Now, the moment we all gathered here for. Undoubtedly, Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, is an opening line that has caught the eye of readers and critics alike in the last 100 years. Woolf's enduring piece, Mrs. Dalloway, has echoed across generations, and today we stand here to commemorate and reflect on its impact on literature and its relevance. And who better to expand on this than Dr. Madge? I now hand over the stage to our speaker, as everyone is really excited to hear from him. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjana, for these kind words. I hope everyone is able to hear me loud and clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I go on. Now, good evening, everybody. Our topic today is Mrs. Dalloway 100. What after? Now, Virginia Woolf was born, since I think Virginia Woolf may not be as familiar to some of you as, say, Eliot or Beckett is. I have divided my talk into two parts. The first one will deal with Virginia Woolf and the works, a short intro, and especially the novelistic technique that she followed, at least in some of her novels, which is known as the stream of consciousness method. And then later on, we'll take a look at the opening passage of Mrs. Dalloway, and I will have something to say on it. And then finally, we'll see what impact has had the stream of consciousness novel on the succeeding generations. So let us dive into the subject. Virginia Woolf was born on 25th Jan 1882, and she was the daughter of Leslie Stephen and Julia Jackson, who was the widow of Herbert Duckworth. Now, both these parents had very strong family associations with literature. Leslie Stephen is famous, as most of you know, for his Dictionary of National Biography, as well as a book, History of English Thought in the 18th Century, which is still regarded as a standard work on the 18th century England. Now, in the early years, Virginia Woolf was not sent to a public school, and perhaps I think that was a better option, as most of us find now. It's better to be educated at home than at school. And I say this because Leslie Stephen had a very huge home library, and Virginia had a free run of it. And she did read very voraciously, so much so that her father said to her once, "By God, Virginia, how you gobble." Later on, Virginia did go to the University of London to study the classics and history. Now, Virginia Woolf is known basically as one of the founding members of a group of writers known as Bloomsbury Group, and that included figures like J.M. Keynes, E.M. Forster, D.H. Lawrence, Lytton Strachey, Rosa Fry, and of course, we should not forget that even Eliot joined that group as a peripheral member. And I think Virginia Woolf had she was amused by this young American, and she seems to have some kind of special fondness for him. She did help him out to get the Wasteland published. Now, of all these members, you will be surprised to know, it was Lytton Strachey who made a marriage proposal to Virginia. And for reasons best known to him, he withdrew that proposal. Yes.
ଏକା ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସେ ଆଗଲି ଗୋଟେ ବର୍ଷ ଦୁସରାତେ ପଢାনো ହୋଇ ସେ ବି ଗଲା ସେଇଟା ପଢୁଥିନୁ ଆରେ ବି ଆରୁ ତ
I think somebody is speaking. Yes. For reasons best known to him, Liechtenstein withdrew that marriage proposal, and instead he suggested his Cambridge friend, Leonard Woolf, to make that proposal to her, which he did in 1912. And in April 1922, I'm sorry, in April.
Sir, I think you are on mute.
Yes, now you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, for reasons best known to him, Liechtenstein withdrew that proposal, and he suggested to his Cambridge friend, Leonard Woolf, to make the proposal, which he did. And in August 1912, they got married. Now, at the time of marriage, Leonard Woolf laid down a condition which might seem a bit odd to us now. The condition was that they would have no sex and they would have no children either. It might seem a bit strange, but then Leonard Woolf was well acquainted with Virginia Woolf and the history of mental instability that she had. In 1895, Virginia Woolf had suffered her first mental breakdown because of a traumatic experience that she had of sexual molestation by her half-brother, Gerald Duckworth. The same year, her mother also died. These two experiences led to a mental breakdown. Then in 1904, her father, Leslie Stephen, died. And that was a big shock to her. So much so that she not only had a breakdown once again, but she tried to commit suicide by jumping out of the window. And as a result, the family doctor suggested that she should be institutionalized. Now, I'm mentioning all these details because they all get reflected in Mrs. Dalloway, as you will very soon find in the case of Leonard's, in the case of Septimus Warren Smith. Now, it, of course, doesn't mean that Leonard Wood did not love his wife. As she says in a suicide note later on, she does thank him for a very loving, kind, sympathetic, understanding relationship. And you will find after 30 years of marriage, almost 30 years, in 1941, Virginia Woolf felt that she had another fit of insanity coming on, and unable to bear that onset of insanity, she committed suicide by drowning herself in the nearby river Ouse. Now, that's in short the life story of hers. And now you will find that her writing career as such can be easily summed up by saying that she has about 9 novels to her name, Her first novel, The Voyage Out, was published in 1915. And the hassles that she had to go through to get that novel published made Leonard Woolf set up a printing press at home and in their Richmond home. That press came to be known as the Hogarth Press, which has been responsible for many publications, especially Virginia Woolf got all her publications published through the Hogarth Press. Now, Mrs. Dalloway happens to be the fourth novel of Virginia Woolf. And before that, she had written a novel called Jacob's Room in 1922. The year is important. We often call it the annus mirabilis of modernism, because in 1922, two other seminal works were published. First of course, as you know, T.S. Eliot's Wasteland and James Joyce's Ulysses. Jacob's Room also was published at that time. And Eliot felt he actually complimented Virginia Woolf on this novel, saying that it's in this novel that she had felt the need of a compromise. She felt the need to break away from tradition and to forge her way ahead. This she could do because she had an extant knowledge of the tradition. Now, this is where, of course, as you can find, Eliot sees her work as a best example of the balance between tradition and the individual talent. Now, what happens is, as you can see, from 1922 to 1940, when or 1941, when her last novel called Between the Acts was published posthumously, her writing career, in a way, spans from 1920s to 1940. This is a period we often know as the high tide of modernism. Now, it must be said to the credit of Virginia Woolf that of all the Bloomsbury group writers, she was perhaps the only one to go in for technical innovation. If you look at the novels of E.M. Forster, Lawrence, they didn't go for that kind of innovation at all. And this once again makes me go back to what her father had said to Virginia. Virginia, how you gobble. Jacob's Room alone shows that Virginia had gobbled not only books from her father's library, but she had gobbled much more, especially the need to break away from the literary tradition. Now, as a modernist, Virginia Woolf divided the contemporary scene into two camps, the Edwardians and the Georgians. And amongst the Edwardians, she singles out H.G. Wells, Galsworthy, and Arnold Bennett. And among the Georgians, she, apart from her, there were James Joyce, E.M. Forster, and D.H. Lawrence. Now, though she talks of Georgians, you will have to note that unlike Eliot and Pound, who denounced the Georgians like anything, Virginia Woolf had seized the Georgians as the hapless victims of their Edwardian predecessors. The younger generation found no role model among the Edwardians, and therefore they had to forge a way of their own. But here I think I should like to point out that Virginia Woolf seems to suffer from the typical British disease called insularity, because in both her essays called The Modern Fiction and Mr. Bennett and Mrs. Brown, not once does she mention the American Henry James. She does mention Joseph Conrad, but only to dismiss him with one liner, oh, but he is a Pole, and so of no use to the British novelists. Now, the literary innovation that Eliot ascribes to Virginia Woolf is popularly known as the stream of consciousness novel, which was essentially a revolt against a school of fiction set up in France by Émile Zola. And that school is known as the naturalist school of fiction. Now, it had its British practitioners also, like George Gissing, then George Moore, and of course, the early Somerset Maugham, especially in his novel Liza of Lambeth. But surprisingly, Virginia Woolf doesn't mention any one of them. She only singles out Galsworthy, E.G. Wells, and Bennett for her tirade. Now, she calls, it's almost as if she regards these three people as the unholy trinity of the Edwardian fiction. Now, both these schools, naturalism as well as the stream of consciousness novel, they had a common assumption about art. What they felt was art must be a photograph of life. So if the assumption is common, then where is the difference? Well, the main bone of contention was their definition of life, what they understood by life. When you say art is a photograph of life, okay, but what is life? For the naturalists, life meant the external reality. And for stream of consciousness people, life is the inner life. Life is lived within. Castigating the unholy trinity, Virginia Woolf calls them materialists because they are bothered only about the external details of life. As she famously reminded these people in a modern fiction, in her essay, The Modern Fiction, she says, when you look at life, what is it that you find? On any single day, we are bombarded with an incessant shower of atoms, of sensations, thoughts, and feelings. And this is what goes on to constitute our life from Monday to Tuesday, Tuesday to Wednesday, and like that. As she famously said, life is not a series of gig lamps arranged symmetrically. Instead, it is a luminous halo, a semi-transparent envelope surrounding us from beginning to end, us and our consciousness. So, if you want to see the difference between these two schools of fiction, I can give you a very simple and concrete example. Let us imagine they are describing a table. A naturalist novelist or a realist novelist would laboriously give you all the details about the life, whether the table is made of wood, what kind of wood, whether it has a glass top or a wooden top or a sun mica, then who is the manufacturer of that. So all these external details would be given, making that table a solid object. Whereas the stream of consciousness novelist like Virginia Woolf would use that table as a pretext to go on and on an odyssey of sensations. A character looks at the table. For instance, Mrs. Dalloway looks at the table, and where instead, what starts in her mind, a train of thoughts and ideas. Where did I see this table? This kind of table I saw in India when I was with Peter Walsh, and then what did he say at that time? So it's a kind of associative writing, what we call in poetry, the associative writing. And in forming such a conception of life, I think these writers were influenced by figures like William James, the American psychologist and philosopher, Sigmund Freud, and the French philosopher Bergson. Now, actually, it was William James who first used the term stream of consciousness in 1885. Consciousness is always in a state of flux. Now, the moment you hear this, you might be reminded, you can easily see the influence of the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who famously said, "You can't step in the same river twice." That is, life is a state of flux. Constant change is the only reality of life. That is what they say. Now, so far, so good. Now, what I want to do is, at this point, in the light of the new emerging studies in America called consciousness studies, which has attracted the attention of many psychologists, philosophers, as well as neuroscientists. For the sake of intellectual clarity, I would like to mention that stream of consciousness is a misnomer. Because according to this new field of study, consciousness is something steady, stable. What moves, meaning these people, William James and others, they have mistaken mind for consciousness. What moves is the mind. Consciousness does not move, consciousness does not flow. And this has been the position of Hindu metaphysicians also from times immemorial. In the Upanishads, you find consciousness is seen as an inner witness of all the goings on in our body-mind complex. It is one steady, stable, self-effulgent light. It is the inner witness. They call it, the Upanishads call that consciousness inner witness or antaryami sakshi. It watches all that goes on in the body-mind complex. So this is where I think we have to make a distinction between consciousness and mind. This is something that we should just bear in our mind. Now, for those of you who are more interested in this, I should like to refer them to a recent book by the American philosopher David Chalmers. The book is entitled The Hard Problem of Consciousness. the Advaitic position is being accepted by more and more neuroscientists and doctors today. So that is something that as Indians we should feel proud. Now coming to the next figure, I don't have to spend much time on this, Sigmund Freud. His conception of mind as an iceberg. 1/8 part the conscious mind, the 7/8 the unconscious, and how that unconscious part shapes the human behavior. With all these ideas we are familiar. What we may not be familiar with so much is the French philosopher Bergson's idea of time. He too regarded time as one flux, and the clock time is something that is man-made and therefore artificial and unreal. It may be useful for practical life, but it's not the absolute reality. When past, present, and future, all these are artificial divisions of time. For those of you who are familiar with Eliot's similar meditations on time in four quartets, the opening lines of four quartets are worth mentioning here. As Eliot says, time past and time future are perhaps present. Time past and time present are both perhaps present in time past, and time past contained in time future. And then he goes on his other meditations of on time. So past and future, meaning the whole idea is time is one eternal flux, one eternal flow. And that is what you will find influencing Virginia Woolf also, especially when we see the opening para of Mrs. Dalloway. Now we can start talking about Mrs. Dalloway. The first thing that we ask about any work of art is what it is about. Now, I can easily tell you what Mrs. Dalloway is all about. It's the story of a single day in the life of Mrs. Dalloway, who is the wife of the Conservative Member of Parliament in England. His name is Richard Dalloway. And that single day is important for many reasons. One of them is Mrs. Dalloway is giving a party to her friends as well as to the political associates of her husband. In fact, the Prime Minister is expected to attend that party also. In the end, the party is celebrated. She is complimented fulsomely by all the guests, especially by the Prime Minister, who says that she is a perfect hostess and all that. Now, side by side, there is also the story of a young boy by the name Septimus Warren Smith, who is a war veteran who has returned from the battlefield with a traumatic experience on his mind, meaning he is a shell shock. He's a shell shock case, as they were known at that time. Robert Graves, the English poet, has a fine therapeutical book on such experiences. He himself was a war veteran. And the name of that book is Goodbye to All That. It's an extremely therapeutic book for him. Now, this Septimus Warren Smith had joined the war for a very romantic reason. He was a lover of Shakespeare before he joined the war. and he joins the war in order to save the England of Shakespeare. Of course, when he actually gets the experience of war, there's no Shakespeare to save. It's all a very different reality. The battlefield realities are extremely different. And he finds his friend, Evans, dying just a week before the armistice. And somehow, Septimus feels that he is somehow responsible for the death of his friend. And so when he returns from the war, he marries a simple Italian girl, Lucrezia, but he has lost all meaning in life. He, like Virginia Woolf, he is also a victim of mental instability, tries to commit suicide, but thanks to Regia, he is saved. But on that day, they are going to see a specialist on the Fleet Street and he's a psychiatrist, very famous, eminent psychiatrist by the name Sir William Bradshaw. They go to meet him, and he immediately diagnoses his case and recommends that he should be institutionalized. He should be sent to his country home. Now, this is where Regia feels disappointed because she doesn't want to get separated from her husband, and they go away from that. Now, at the party of Mrs. Dalloway, the Bradshaws are also the invitees, and they go late for the party. And Lady Bradshaw informs Clarissa that they were late because they were held up as one of the patients of her husband, Sir William Bradshaw, had committed suicide. When she hears that news about the suicide of Septimus, somehow she feels some kind of spiritual affinity for him. Now remember, she has not seen Septimus at all. But when she hears of his suicide, somehow or the other, she feels spiritual affinity. She is very much disturbed. She retires to her private chamber, and she feels that, like Septimus, she too had lost meaning in life. She too had led a very stifled existence thanks to her husband. And whereas she had found an outlet in leading a socialite life by arranging parties like this, Septimus had the courage to fight against the slings and arrows of an outrageous fortune and to escape from this menace called life. And that is where the novel ends. Now, I would like to show to you how Virginia Woolf goes about telling the story, if any story it is, of Mr. Dalloway. Now, can I request, I had requested for the passage to be shown on the screen.
Yes, sir. Yes, I am doing it.
Yeah. So that everyone can. Just a few lines from the opening paragraph. Yes. Can I start reading now? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. For Lucy had her work cut out before her. The doors would be taken off their hinges. Rumpelmayer's men were coming. And then, thought Clarissa, what a morning, fresh as if issued to children on a beach. What a lark, what a plunge, for so it had always seemed to her when, with a little squeak of hinges which she could hear now, she had burst open the French windows and plunged Burton into the open air. How fresh, how calm, stiller than this, of course, the air was in the early morning. Like the flap of a wave, the kiss of a wave, chill and sharp, and yet, for a girl of 18 as she then was, solemn, feeling as she did, standing there at the open window, that something awful was going to happen. Looking at the flowers, at the trees with the smoke winding off them and the rooks rising, falling, standing and looking until Peter Wall said, musing among the cabbages, was that it? I prefer men to cauliflowers. Was that it? He must have said it at breakfast one morning when she had gone out onto the terrace. Peter was. He would be back from India one of these days, June or July, she forgot which, for his letters were awfully dull. It was his sayings one remembered, his eyes, his pocket knife, his smile, his grumpiness, and when millions of things had utterly vanished, how strange it was, a few sayings like this about cabbages. She stiffened a little on the curb, waiting for the Dartnall's van to pass. A charming woman, Scope always thought her, knowing her as one does know people who live next door to one in Westminster. A touch of the bird about her, of the jay, blue-green, light, vivacious, though she was over 40 and grown very white since her illness. There she perched, never seeing him, waiting to cross, very upright. Now, what happens, in a traditional novel? This would take just one single line. Mrs. Dalloway went out to buy flowers. At the most, they would say, as she was waiting at the roadside, a van passed, and the driver thought that she was a charming woman. Nothing more than that. It would take a line and a half to describe the action, the so-called what happens in the novel. But look how Virginia Woolf goes about this. This is the difference between stream of consciousness novel and the realist novel. As you can see, especially from, what a lark, what a plunge, as you must have felt very easily. The whole style the style flows like it's very fluid, flexible. The syntactic structure is very flexible. It's a very loose, free-flowing flow of the narrative. What a lark, what a plunge, for so it had always seemed to her, when with a little squeak of hinges, which she could hear now, she had burst open the French windows and plunged Burton into the open air. Now you can see how time past and time present are mixed up here. She is actually going out. She is thinking of bursting open the French windows when she was 18 years of age at Burton. And she at the same time hears the squeak of hinges, the doors being taken off their hinges. She can hear that sound. So the past and present are fused together in one sentence. It's the same technique that goes on in the next sentence. How fresh, how calm, stiller than this, of course, the air was in the early morning, like the flap of a wave, like the kiss of a wave, chill and sharp, solemn, feeling as she did, standing there at the open window. that something awful was going to happen, looking at flowers, at the trees with smoke rising off them, until Peter Walsh said, and then Peter Walsh, of course, is the ex-lover or ex-boyfriend. And then the comes to Peter Walsh, and there you will find a long dash, suggesting that the direction of thought has now changed from the lark and the fresh air. Now she is thinking of Peter Walsh. He would be back from India one of these days, and this goes on. But then you see how beautifully she has developed the character. She has described the character of Peter Walsh. A traditional characterization would have been how tall he was, whether he was strong or weak. The physical features would have, without mentioning the physical features of Peter Walsh. See how Virginia Woolf delineates the character for her. She just mentions his habits. For his letters were awfully dull. It was his sayings one remembered, his eyes, his pocket knife, his smile, his grumpiness, and when millions of things had utterly vanished, how strange it was. A few sayings like this. So what was memorable about Peter Walsh? Were his habits, very strange habit. His fiddling, especially his fiddling with pocket knife, and his eyes, all that. Then in the next para, you see she's waiting at the roadside for the van to pass, and the van driver passes by, and as he looks at her, you can say, a charming woman, Scope Purvis thought her. The whole point of view has now changed from Mrs. Dalloway to Scope Purvis. This kind of writing, is very memorably described by Eric Orbeck. Eric Orbeck has a monumental book called Mimesis. And in Mimesis, he studies the ways of representing. The subtitle of that book is Representation of Reality in Western Literature. And there is one chapter on Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, where he analyzes the fifth section of that novel, Measuring the Brown Stocking. And after analyzing that passage in detail, he mentions that this way of writing is what he calls, in very memorable terms, once you hear that term, you will know everything about stream of consciousness novel. He says it's a simultaneous, multi-dimensional representation of reality. I think that sums it all. Beyond that, there is nothing much left to say. It's simultaneous, multi-dimensional representation of reality. And here you will see especially the influence of Bergson. Time past, time present are fused together in one sentence and all that. The style is extremely lyrical, extremely poetic, and this is one of the main attractions of Virginia Woolf's novels, especially Mrs. Dalloway and The Lighthouse. Now, after having said all this, I would like to ask the question, in spite of all this technical virtuosity, what has been the impact of this mode of novel writing? And I'm afraid it has been a very limited one. In fact, we can say the stream of consciousness novel, which began with Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Dorothy Richardson, also died with them. No succeeding novelist has ever picked up this mode of writing again. Yes, there are patches, meaning I don't say there has had been no influence. There is. Writers do write now in patches to show the inner life of the character. But they don't sustain that mode of writing throughout the novel. Look at, I can give you some names: Huxley, Foster, Lawrence, Evelyn Waugh, Graham Greene, Goulding, the angry young novelist. None of them has adopted this mode of writing. In fact, they have gone in for the conventional mode. In our own time, Muriel Spark, in a Paris interview, has said that she wants to write like H.G. Wells. Meaning it's a complete revenge on Virginia Woolf, as it were, that these contemporary writers want to go back to the conventional mode of the materialists. And it's instructive to see why stream of consciousness novel has had such a limited success. To my mind, the main reason is that they dispense totally with story and plot. And story, as most of you know, is an inevitable, inseparable, integral part of the novel. And you can call story a necessary evil. I think Foster has a more sensible view of the matter. In the aspects of the novel, Foster answers the question, what does a novel do? And he gives you three examples, three types of readers: an engine driver who enjoys the story, and there is the end of it all. There is a fashionable lady, a snob, who says, I want a story and nothing but a story. And then finally, there is an old man sitting in his armchair, probably a novelist, probably E.M. Foster himself. How does he answer the question? What does a novel do, sir? The novel tells you a story, dear. Look at the sad, rueful tone. The sentence has to be spoken with the right tone of voice. The novel tells you a story, dear. That is, a novel can do many other things. A novelist can do many other things. But he must tell a good story. I am not saying that novel is only storytelling, or storytellers alone are good novelists. No. What I can say in an epigrammatic style, all storytellers are not good novelists, but all novelists are good storytellers. Without the story, you can't do what you want to do. A story is a must. Look at the Russian novelists, especially Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. In spite of their so-called loose, baggy monsters, they can tell a story well, and that is why they survive. Meaning they do many other things than telling the story, but they can manage to hold on. I do remember many years back, Dr. Sinai gave me to teach Dostoevsky's novel, The Idiot. And I was really frightened because it's a big tome of 1,500 pages. And I did not know when I would finish the reading and start teaching. But as I started reading, it was simply an unput-downable book, pages after pages. Meaning, it's a very fast-moving novel. In spite of the fact that beside the story, he does many other things as well. So I just failed to see there's one more point, and that is I failed to see why Virginia Woolf set out to write the stream of consciousness novels in 1922 when Ulysses was published. And as most of you know about Ulysses, we say in Ulysses, James Joyce had completely exhausted all the possibilities of that genre. though Eliot was very enthusiastic about Ulysses in 1922 for its mythical method and all that, in 1955, in his Essay on Literary Criticism, 1957 also, the same Eliot says that of the works like Ulysses, of masterpieces like Ulysses, all that we say is one of its kind is enough. Of course, Joyce did not oblige him. Joyce had gone on to write Finnegan's Wake also. There's a small story that I should like to mention, and that is there was a Joyce specialist in our department. He had a DPhil on Joyce. And I told him that students and even teachers find it very difficult to read Ulysses. So can you suggest any way of making the reading of Ulysses any easier? And he said that the best way to make Ulysses easier is to start reading Finnegan's Wake. So when he had exhausted all the possibilities of the poem, I just don't know. But of course, she does it very differently from Joyce. I mean, that has to be said. She does it very differently from Joyce. Especially one has to admire her for the lyrical and the poetic style. And it's also worthwhile to note that Virginia Woolf herself went back to write the novels in conventional mode, especially after To the Lighthouse. The novels that came after, Waves, Between the Acts, all these are in the conventional mode. She didn't continue with the stream of consciousness method. So, how does Mr. Dalloway appear to us now? Frankly, I may be politically incorrect or I may be of the older generation, but to my mind, novels like Ulysses and Mrs. Dalloway, they are hothouse plants. They are objects of mere academic curiosity and academic study. The question to be asked is, does it resonate with our generation? And frankly, I don't think it does. Whether it will resonate with the generation of 21, 25, I do not know. Fingers crossed. I don't know. So Virginia Woolf is, to use a sporting analogy, Mr. Dalloway is something like a batter who has scored 100, yes. But whether the batter will go on to score a double century, I don't know, meaning I am not sure. But to end on a positive note, let me tell you that Mr. Dalloway, immediately after its publication in 1925, was acclaimed as a classic example of modernist fiction. Although in some quarters, readers were confused. Now, Virginia Woolf's own reputation was very high till 1940. But after the Second World War, it dipped. In 1970, it rose up, but not as a novelist, as a feminist, meaning her book, A Room of One's Own. She came to be seen as a proto-feminist. And that is why her reputation went high, and it has been so ever since that time. Now, there have been quite interesting adaptations and reworkings of Mrs. Dalloway, which I would like to tell you. And that is, There is a novel by Michael Cunningham, the American novelist. He has named the novel The Hours, which was originally the title of Mrs. Dalloway. It has won many awards. It was adapted into film also. The film also won an Oscar. Then Robin Lippincott has a novel with an interesting title, Mr. Dalloway. But I was disappointed when I saw that novel. And then the British novelist and journalist John Lanchester has a novel by the name Mr. Philip. All these novels were published around 1998 and 2000. And more recently, there has been a novel by the Goan Indo-Anglian writer Michelle Cahill, who is settled in Australia. The novel by the name Daisy and Wolf that was published in 2023. And then there is another novelist, Miranda Darling. She has done a reworking on Thunderhead that was done in 2024. Now, all these, in spite of all these adaptations, I must say, I must stick to my own opinion. These adaptations simply show the poverty of the imagination of these new writers. It's a kind of literary cannibalism. In fact, I don't go into the details, but their works have been extremely derivative, and they tee off from where Mr. Dalloway, for instance, is a very fine example. Mr. Dalloway, I thought the writer would put the husband's viewpoint rather than Clarissa's. But what he shows is because Mrs. Dalloway is supposed to have a lesbian relation with her friend Sally Satan, Mr. Dalloway is shown to be a gay man. And that's how it goes on. They are all in the form of either metafictions or postmodern fiction like that, but by themselves they carry nothing. So I come back to my point. As we celebrate the centenary of Mrs. Dalloway, do we have any hope of it surviving for the next 100 years? I doubt, because beyond technical virtuosity, there is nothing in the novel. Meaning, Clarissa Dalloway's concerns, her problems in life, they remain very much personal. They don't get transmuted into the general and the universal. Something that happens, for instance, in the Westland, I can mention, but then you will say I am being partial to Eliot. But then let us, and that is a poem. This is a novel. I'll take another novel, and that is Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. It's not an African novel only. There is the detribalization and its impact and all that. But the way Chinua Achebe has narrated the story in such beautiful, simple English, the story has transmuted itself into the symbol, a general universal symbol of all those people for whom their old world is dying out and the new world is unfit, the brave new world is unfit for them to live. I can end up by my favorite example. Look at people like us who enter the profession to teach Shakespeare and Milton and Wordsworth and now have to compromise, eke out our existence by teaching communication skills. Such people, I think, for them, Okonkwo has shown the way. That's the thing. So Mr. Dalloway fails to transmute like this into a journal experience. It is very simply the problems of a British aristocratic Georgian lady. It doesn't go beyond, or at the most we can say it's a fictionalization of Virginia Woolf's own problems. That's all. But they remain at the personal level. They don't get into the general universal category. So that's all that I have to say. And that's why I'm so doubtful whether it will resonate with the younger generation of the next century, or whether it resonates even now. I would like to learn from you. So thank you very much for this and your patience.
Thank you so much, sir. That was such an enlightening talk that touched on such relevant topics that I'm sure all of us have enjoyed for the last hour. But before we move on, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge a few esteemed dignitaries that have joined us here today. First, we are honored to be in the presence of Dr. Zedin Patil, President of the ELTAI Pune chapter, Dr. Atul Patil, Director, School of Humanities and School of Holistic Development, MIT Arts, Design and Technology University, Dr. Nandkumar Shinde, Head of the Department of English, MIT ADT University, and Dr. Kamal Mehta, Professor of Department of English and CLS, Saurashtra University, Rajkot. Thank you so much for being here and gracing us with your presence in this event. And I'm sure the audience are ready with all their questions, with all this new information and perspective. So yes, let's now begin with our Q&A session. You can raise your hands and unmute yourselves and interact with the speaker. Megha Shinde has had her hand raised for quite some time. Ma'am, do you have anything to say?
Can you listen me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Sir, it was very nice session.
Yes. Thank
Meeting
you.
after meeting after long time. Presently, I am working in Wagire College, Saswad.
I see. Transfer there. Good.
Since 4 years, I have been transferred from AM College.
I see. Megha had been my MA student, BA and MA student.
Yes, sir.
She's used to my torture. So.
Yes. I hope I meet you very soon.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have Ruxar Patan. You can unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Sir, as you have given a few opinions about a few works that you just mentioned, including Mrs. Dalloway. So, like that, I just want to know one more opinion on a few types of work. For example, as you mentioned that works like Mrs. Dalloway, they are basically aimed for academic curiosity and academic analysis, not for general public. So, what would be your opinion of the works which are aimed for general public to read, not just for academic curiosity and academic analysis?
Okay.
And because I just want to know your opinion only because these works basically famous as popular literatures. They are usually looked down upon by the critics. Usually,
yes.
which
as they
so
should.
just want to know your opinion about them.
Yes. You see, I think I told you there. I think in my talk I mentioned novel is not only storytelling. It has to go beyond that. Because what happens with bestsellers like this, once you turn the last page, the interest is over. Whereas in classics like this, you go back to them again and again. And every time you go back, you find a new meaning in the text. Now, that is what has to happen. I gave you some examples also, like the Russian fiction, that is the best. still that is my opinion. Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, even Turgenev, these are best examples of the best world fiction. And the English literature has nothing to compare with them. Even the best novelist that we have, Dickens, is a is an entertainer to some extent, not not much more than that. George Eliot, of course, comes very near to Tolstoy, and that she's in fact called it the Tolstoy of English fiction. But novel is not mere entertainment. That is true. And so that's why, there is a distinction between popular literature or bestsellers and the classics. That is the one thing. Once again, to come back to my favorite way of putting it, all popular literature may not turn into classics, but the classics were at one time very popular. Meaning that's there.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Please, you can raise your hands or you can unmute yourself and start asking.
Professor Madge.
Oh, yes, Jaden. Yes,
Jaden here.
Yeah.
Jaden here. Thank you so much for a wonderful. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, and it was really listening to you was a treat. Listening to you was a treat. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
By the way, your two descriptions of a table reminded me of two descriptions or two responses to daffodils. For example, on the one hand, you have a botanical description of a daffodil flower. On the other hand, we have Wordsworth's response to daffodils and Robert Herrick's response to daffodils as well.
Yes,
so,
yes, true.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you
so much. I enjoyed your talk very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one more person, Sachin Labade. You can unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjana. So I'm Sachin Labade. I'm your student from 1998 batch from the University Department of Pune. It was, of course, a pleasure to listen to you because you were the one who introduced us to Chaucer. And we remember Chaucer only through you, sir. Like when we think of Chaucer, we think of you, or when we think of you, we think of Chaucer. So it's thanks to a tool that he shared the link with me, and I said, I was more than Mrs. Dalloway, I was interested in listening to Dr. Vijay Madge. And I'm glad that I could listen to your talk, and it was pleasure, sir. So, as I was listening to your talk, and you talked about stream of consciousness. What I wanted to know, I mean, it is just a curiosity of a 1998 batch student of yours. That do you think that the stream of consciousness was a kind of product, as a style? It was a product of its own time. Especially the Western writers, were able to produce this style of writing because of the times they lived in. And what happened to this, technique over a period of time, especially when literature traveled, then styles traveled from the West to India, and we had some Indian writers experimenting with this kind of style of writing, like including Bhalchandra Nemade. Yeah. So do you think that stream of consciousness has survived as a style of writing over a period of time, and also across literatures, looking at Indian literatures and your experience of Indian literature? I'm sorry for stretching my question, but just curious to know from you, sir.
Yeah, I said in my talk that the stream of consciousness was very much a daring experiment to narrate. But what they did was they did away with story, forgetting that if there is life within, there is life without also. And they dispense totally with life without. So that made their technique, though it was a very daring attempt, a technical innovation at the time, it had a very limited impact on succeeding generations. Let me tell you how. You see, with poetry, you can be experimental because anyway, the viewership of poetry is very small and it's easy to get the volumes of verse published because they are very small and thin. Whereas coming to the novel, novel is a very fat affair. And I sometimes wonder, whether Virginia Woolf was able, I mean, she didn't have these problems to get a novel published because she had a home press, Hogarth press at home. She could get whatever she wrote published very easily. Now, that is not the case with other novelists. See, what happens is they have to get their novel published. And no publisher would be able to or would be willing to invest his money into a matter which will not sell. So there are the commercial constraints also for stream of consciousness. That is what I would say. And so far as the succeeding generation shows, as I said in my talk, there are patches, meaning limited. Sometimes you find a paragraph here or there where the writer goes under the skin of the character and describes the flow of his thoughts and ideas. But to write an entire novel in that mode is not seen at all. Now, the only person I haven't read her, that is Anita Desai. Anita Desai has, she's called Virginia Woolf of Indian fiction, that much I know, but I haven't read much of her. And Nemadi, of course, I haven't read at all. So it would be difficult for me to comment on his works. But the impact of stream of consciousness technique has been extremely limited. That is what I would say.
With the kind permission of the chairperson, can I ask one little question, please?
Yes.
Professor Madge, this is Zedon again.
Yes.
So with the kind permission of the chairperson of the session, I would like to ask one little question. Would you describe soliloquies and asides as two techniques or tools of stream of consciousness?
What is that? Asides and?
Asides and soliloquies.
Would
you like to describe asides and soliloquies in Shakespearean plays as tools of stream of consciousness?
It's a different genre altogether. Drama is a different genre, novel is another different form of art. So you would be transporting the vocabulary of one genre to another. So
no, because I find soliloquies and asides quite similar to stream of consciousness.
Yes, that's true. But the point is, sometimes in the novel, a character may reminisce about her past experiences in front of another character, and the other character may not know. That doesn't happen in drama. In drama, generally, when a character soliloquizes, he or she is alone on the stage.
No, I agree with you when you say that novel and drama are two different genres. Yeah. But then it is also true that a novel is described as a pocket drama. And therefore, soliloquies and asides in Shakespearean plays.
I am not saying that they are not. No, I am not saying they are not. It's only transferring the vocabulary of one form to another. Soliloquies are just like that. Yes, that is true. Yeah,
Okay.
that is true.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
We have Sangeeta Godake with her hands raised. Can you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Ma'am, are you here? Okay. Yes, ma'am, you can unmute yourself. We can't hear you, ma'am. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, you can
I
speak
think
now.
only the host will probably be able to do this.
No, sir. People are able to unmute themselves. I'll still try on my end.
Okay.
Sangeeta, ma'am, can you unmute yourself? We cannot. You're muted, or you're not able to. You can type your question in the chat box. Otherwise, I will read it out. Meanwhile, we have Kamal Mehta. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Sir, first of all, thank you very much for such a wonderful, delightful talk. And it reminded me of my MA days when you used to teach us in the department. It was really wonderful. Really wonderful. And in a sense, couple of things came for discussion through questions. One was, that why such kinds of techniques do not become so popular. And you rightly said that they did not become universal. And the reason is these works are trend setters. And anyone who sets a new trend will have to go to the extreme. Then only it is taken a very serious note by others. And therefore, others may not be able to follow her completely in their works, because that also needs a different kind of ability. But they might have picked up something, and they have been picking up something from that and using them in their works. And that is how, in fact, we are sensitized to what is called the internal reality of mankind or an individual. And that has, in fact, been the new aspect added by Virginia Woolf in her novels.
Yes.
Secondly, the works become great when they're able to balance the two aspects, entertaining aspect and teaching aspect. Wherever one becomes more than 75%, then it has to suffer the loss in one way or the other. And you rightly said Dostoevsky and number of other Russian novelists, why they are so popular, because they are able to balance these two so well.
Exactly.
The way we have Vedavyas, for example, or Valmiki, they are able to balance these two so well that they continue to remain relevant, they continue to entertain all the groups, all the genders, all the age groups, and so on and so forth. And therefore, they become very, very popular. And lastly, Patel sir raised an issue regarding soliloquy, aside, and stream of consciousness. Discussion was very interesting between both of you. What I very humbly want to say is that aside and soliloquy are not stream of consciousness technique. And the reason is consciousness and the representation of consciousness is never rational. But soliloquies and asides are absolutely rational. They are well organized. It is not a photo. It is not a copy of what is actually taking place. But when we read stream of consciousness works, then we find it very irrational, and we have to apply our mind so much to find out exactly what do they refer to and what do they imply. And therefore, though all the three, in fact, they attempt at revealing the internal reality. And in drama, soliloquy provides that opportunity, aside provides that opportunity, in novel stream of consciousness provides that opportunity.
Yes.
So they are focusing on the same reality, but they have different ways of representing the reality. And since they differ in the representation, they're different. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I'll take up your last point. Yes, in Aristotelian sense, though both the things look similar, there's a difference in manner of presentation or manner of imitation. Secondly, the novelists have a well developed ideology behind them. They have the backing of psychology in stream of consciousness. And they were just working out in literary terms those psychological discoveries. Whereas in asides and soliloquies, well, the writers were not that much aware of psychology. That's why I told Jaden that you are transferring the vocabulary of one genre to another, and that is not very apt because the vocabulary doesn't fit there. That's for a number of reasons, and as you rightly explained, yes, that's so. That is so.
Thank you so much, Mehta sir. I think ma'am's mic is finally working. We'll take this as the last comment now, since we're almost running out of time. Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much. Dear Professor Madge sir, it's an honor to reconnect with you. I'm Sangeeta Ghodke. Do you remember?
Yes. Oh, yes. Of course I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Currently working at Professor Ramakrishna More College, Akurdi.
Okay.
Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed your session and appreciated the intellectual stimulation it provided. I'm grateful to Professor Atul Patil for inviting me. I would love to meet you in person and receive your blessings, sir.
Okay, do come.
Yes.
Always welcome.
Yes, sir. Please take care of your health. Your insightful discussions on the nuances of mind and consciousness, infused with literary allusions, were truly enriching for me. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, everyone. Now I'd like to call over Sinha sir for his concluding remarks on today's session. Over to you, sir.
Sanjana, Dr. Madge, and all our friends, it was a pleasure listening to the talk. Dr. Madge had a very stimulating talk. At the same time, he was a very good communicator. Dr. Madge has a great ability to convey complex ideas in simple language. And that, I think, is the hallmark of a great teacher. I do want to add a couple of things because I jotted down a few points which I'll raise, but he's already mentioned all of them. So I guess there is not much to point out. I do want to mention that it was not a coincidence, perhaps, that Ulysses also deals with only a single day, and so does, so does Mrs. Dalloway. They both appeared around the same time within a few years, and that was a remarkable coincidence. The second point I want to mention is that outside England, there was this trend in France as well. There was Marcel Proust, who wrote his famous series, Remembrance of Things Past. And the first novel, Swan's Way, became quite popular, although I'm not sure that many people could read it, but it made certain waves. I also want to mention finally that we actually have in the novel two concepts of time: the subjective time of Mrs. Dalloway and the characters, and the tolling of the Big Ben. The Big Ben is a constant reminder of the flow of time and of the fact that there's something called objective time. I think I've already exceeded the so-called time limit, not in my own talk, but the overall session has gone over the objective time. So I think I should thank you all and say once again, Dr. Madge, and once again, I thank all those people who have contributed to the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we have come to the end of today's session. I'm sure you all had a great time and will be excited for our future events too. So before we leave, I'd like to hand over the stage to Mr. Madge Joshi, who will brief us about the upcoming events of the Literary Club. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjana. Good evening, everyone. We are having the next meeting, that is meeting 54 of the Literary Club on 13th September 2025. And the topic for the next meeting is disability studies. We shall be dealing with the theory of disability studies. The speaker will be Dr. Kirtana R. She is a research scholar at Welltech Institute of Science and Technology in Tamil Nadu. She will be introducing this theory of disability studies. We'll be examining scenes from literary texts and films in the light of disability studies. So we heartily welcome everyone on 13th September. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. And before you all leave, there's a link to the feedback form in the chat box. Please do fill that up, and we look forward to seeing you in our next session. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Madge sir and Sinha sir.
Okay, thank you, Sanjay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.